各位傳媒朋友早晨。
Good morning. Welcome to the media briefing. The Chief Executive would first speak before we take questions from the floor. Please maintain social distancing in the room. Chief Executive, please. Members of the media, members of the public. Today, I would deliver an update on the pandemic, especially with regards to Kwai Chung Estate. Since the 30th of December last year, in light of the local infections due to Omicron, we have entered a new phase of the pandemic, or what we call the fifth wave. Over the past 3 weeks, we saw a few sources of infection. First, from aircrew members that gave rise to the Moon Palace cluster, and as well as a dancing cluster. And so far, this source has come under control. The second source arose from a person who was infected in a quarantine hotel, and that led to a major outbreak in the community, and that involved the Kwai Chung Estate cluster. In a moment, I would deliver an update on the situation at Kwai Chung Estate, and according to experts, there was a cluster stemming from infected imported hamsters. As for the Kwai Chung Estate, the Omicron variant was involved, and the Delta variant cluster arising from the hamsters is still expanding. Now an update on the Kwai Chung Estate situation. On the 22nd of January, which was a Saturday, we talked about the measures to be adopted. At that time, in light of the strong transmissibility of the Omicron variant, any outbreak would lead to an exponential rise in the number of cases. In terms of Kwai Chung Estate, on the 22nd, I delivered an update on the 3-day figures based on the number of positive and preliminary cases at that time. And on the 22nd, there were 9 cases. On 21st, 20 cases. 22nd, that was Saturday, we saw 105 cases. By the 23rd of January, we had a total of 173 cases. As of yesterday, we had 226 cases overall. At the 4:30 p.m. Briefing yesterday, Dr. Chang Shuk-kwan did not give a specific figure, but she indicated that there were more than 200 cases. And as of this morning, as of the 24th of January, the number of positive and preliminary positive cases stands at 226. And these are distributed across different units. At more than 10 units of Kwai Chung, as 10 blocks at Kwai Chung Estate, cases were detected. For 94% or 210 cases, they were located in 3 buildings. First, Yat Kwai House. We are still seeing new cases arising from that building. The second building is Ying Kwai House. For Yat Kwai House and Ying Kwai House, they were subject to 5-day compulsory lockdowns. Another building saw more than 10 new cases, that is Ha Kwai House. And these new cases were found yesterday. And as such, I announced that today, starting from today, Ha Kwai House would be subject to a 5-day compulsory testing notice, and it will end on the 28th of January. Ha Kwai House was subject to a restriction testing declaration yesterday, and the work is still ongoing. And like Ying Kwai House earlier, today we will issue a 5-day lockdown, and the lockdown for Ha Kwai House started yesterday, and it will be subject to a 5-day lockdown. For Yat Kwai House, which was the first building to see an outbreak in the estate, so far more than 150 cases have been found. It is the building with the most cases in Kwai Chung Estate. The lockdown order would expire next morning, and we would extend the lockdown by 2 days till the 28th of January. For the lockdown period at Har Kwai House, it would be clarified. For Yat Kwai House, the lockdown will have expired on the 26th. That is tomorrow in the morning. Now the lockdown will be extended by 2 days. For Yin Kwai House, the lockdown period started 1 day earlier and will finish 1 day later as well. And yesterday we saw that the number of positive preliminary positive cases dropped to single digits. So we would look at the situation today and deliver an update later. For the remaining dozen or so cases, they were distributed across different buildings with a few cases each. This afternoon, we will decide whether other buildings at Kwai Chung Estate would be subject to a 1-day lockdown. Hopefully, we can identify the confirmed cases in the estate as soon as possible to curb the transmission chain. I understand that residents in Kwai Chung Estate might be concerned about the news, and I call for their understanding. We must be decisive and adopt stringent measures to curb the transmission. Once again, I express my gratitude to the residents of Kwai Chung Estate for their cooperation and understanding. The Hong Kong SAR government will continue to reinforce our staff in order to carry out the relevant work, including cleansing work and the clearing of garbage in the estate, the distribution of meal boxes. We also provide an inquiry hotline, and the residents should be quarantined or tested as necessary, and we will continue to improve our work. Like I said, for such large-scale operations, a lot of manpower is needed, and at any given time at Kwai Chung Estate, more than 1,800 staff members are deployed to support the residents. For residents of Chin Kwai House, on the 22nd and 23rd of January, the overnight lockdown took place concurrently with 3 other buildings, but the lockdown was only ended a few days earlier. At that time, we were informed by a laboratory that there could be positive cases at Chin Kwai House. So to play safe, we did not end the lockdown order immediately. Subsequently, it was clarified that the samples that tested positive came from another building. So a few hours later, we ended the lockdown order at Chin Kwai House. So we were up against time, and the testing and laboratory efforts were both a race against time, and we had to act on the positive and preliminary positive cases in order to isolate and treat the infected persons as soon as possible. Like I said, the housing department has been providing high-level steer on the overall operation. So the senior management of housing department has been providing high-level steer at Kwai Chung Estate. But the efforts of the housing department would not be enough. That's why I said more than 1,800 staff have been deployed, and more than 6 testing contractors have been deployed at Kwai Chung Estate. 10 specimen collection stations are provided, and 30,000 people could be tested every day. On the 22nd and 23rd of January, about 19,000 tests were carried out at Kwai Chung Estate every day. So our current testing capacity is 30,000, so we do have sufficient capability. But like I said, we will continue to refine our work. This wave of outbreak is vicious, and like I said, the sources of infection that are still brewing involve both the Delta and Omicron variants. So the situation is worrying. Apart from Kwai Chung Estate, we also adopted stringent measures at other locations, including Tropicana Gardens at Wong Tai Sin yesterday. We were concerned about vertical transmission in the block. That is why we put the relevant units under quarantine. For the person who tested positive, he wasn't the first case to be discovered, and he was once considered to be an index case. He kept a hamster, but he did not surrender the hamster, and he started showing symptoms on January the 15th. He did not receive testing despite seeking medical attention. We adopted measures on Tropicana Gardens because a sewage sample tested positive, and upon investigation, this case was discovered on the 23rd. If he got tested earlier, and if he realized that he was subject to risk since he kept a hamster, the transmission chain could have been avoided. As for Fukeng House of Taiwo Hao, it was the second building in the housing estate to be subject to compulsory testing. 2 units on the lower floors were involved, and the experts consider that these units could be subject to risk. For the 2,000 and so residents at Yat Kwai House, before the restriction testing declarations were made, these people would visit their workplaces, and that could lead to small-scale outbreaks. For a construction site at Ho Man Tin, one of the construction workers lived in Yat Kwai House. And including this worker, there were 9 positive or preliminary positive cases from Yat Kwai House, and about 100 construction workers were listed as close contacts and had to be quarantined. We also saw a number of local untraceable cases. So far, the Center for Health Protection is yet to identify whether these cases involve the 2 transmission chains I mentioned. We wanted to take preemptive action through compulsory testing as well as sewage testing. There were cases in which sewage samples tested positive, and subsequently we identified confirmed or preliminary positive cases through RTDs or CTNs. And currently, the DSD, EBD, and HKU set up a sewage testing unit, and the scope of sewage surveillance has been reinforced. Even after the 4th wave stabilized, the sewage testing efforts never stopped, and we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in research costs, and in light of the recent wave of outbreak, the team would continue to sample sewage from high-risk areas, and collection or sampling would take place at the downstream, and they would also conduct upstream tracing in order to most effectively deploy our testing capabilities. In the past 2 years, we have been constantly learning from our experience in order to improve our work, and we have reinforced our capabilities during this time as well. And we will continue to adopt a scientific approach, but at the same time, we have to consider the impacts on the public. Like I said, for residents of Yat Kwai House, they would be anxious since they are subject to 2 more days of lockdown. But at the end of the day, we need to consider what the most prudent approach is. But in the meantime, we hope to minimize disturbance or inconvenience to the public through improving our measures. So the epidemic fighting ability is not without limit. And that is why we would reinforce our capabilities, including testing capacity. Like I said, our daily testing capacity has been increased to 100,000, and in recent days, we carried out up to 150,000 tests per day. As to whether we can further increase our capacity, this is something we are now looking at. If support from the mainland is required, this is something we would not turn down. In the year 2020, the central government has provided us support in different ways, and with our reinforced testing capabilities over the past year, we have not sought direct support from the mainland. But after all, at the end of the day, we are one family, and the Guangdong province has expressed to my office that they are happy to render support. So it's about considering how we can best utilize the support to help Hong Kong.
About the 4th day after the Chinese New Year, now the current round of restriction will last until the 3rd of February. That is the 3rd day of the Chinese New Year. I will give you an update about the situation after the 4th day of CNY in this week. But there is a very slim chance we can relax the distancing measures completely. The current the departments and bureaus are considering whether we can adjust the social distancing measures after the 3rd. The priority is to expand the vaccine bubble by boosting the vaccination rate. There will be people objecting to vaccination, and people will be unhappy. However, this is something we must do. We have to impose stringent requirements for people entering premises. They have to be jabbed. The vaccination rate is still low among the elderly. I express gratitude to the elderly people. Since the vaccine bubble idea was announced, we are seeing higher number of vaccination every day. I used to say that if we can get 20,000 people vaccinated per day, then by the 24th of February, we will achieve 80% of vaccination rate. So far, the vaccination rate is 78.1% among people who were given the first dose. More than 800,000 people have been given the 3rd jab. The situation is satisfactory. In this week, I will announce further details about the measures after the third day of Chinese New Year. I want to make an appeal to the public. This is the last EXCO meeting before the Lunar New Year holidays. I urge the public to reduce social gathering during the holidays, including cross-family gatherings. Do stay at home. Through our concerted efforts, we can surely overcome this wave of outbreak. Thank you. Now the floor is open to questions. Please raise your hands and please identify your media organization and use our microphone to put your questions. The lady in gray. Good morning, Mrs. Lam. I'm from the Hong Kong Economic Journals. You said you would investigate the Women's Home birthday party. Can you give us an update about the investigation? And Casper Choi, you said you were disappointed with him. Well, if he is not asked to step down eventually, would you think that the political responsibility system is not effective? And also Director of Immigration, Mr. Ao Ka Wang, if he is allowed to resume work, does it mean that this government would lose credits from the people of Hong Kong? The question is about the birthday party on the 3rd of January. A dozen of government officials attended the birthday party. I said there would be serious investigation. The investigation is almost completed. I will give an account to the public before the Chinese New Year holidays. Before that, it is not the right time to comment on individual official. On the 6th of January, I said I had certain information, including when these officials went to the birthday party and how long they stayed. For the Secretary for Home Affairs, yes, I said I was disappointed with him. Today, I maintain this stance. However, I don't want to comment on individual colleagues today. Rest assured, under the political responsibility system, there are certain requirements for officials. And also under the Civil Service Code, we have high standards for our officials. They have to be diligent. They have to be always careful about their behaviors. They shouldn't bring the government into disrepute. So that's my standard in dealing with this matter. As I said, I would like to give you a full account later. Next question, please. The gentleman in white. Good morning, Mrs. Lam, Now TV. About the officials. You said it is not the right time to comment individually on officials. But what about the 3 officials? Have they resumed work yet? It is related to the fight against the epidemic, and it is of public concern. If they are on leave, is it you who asked them to be on leave, or did they take leave on their own? And about the Kwai Chung estate, another building is subject to 5 days restriction or home isolation. What is the standard in deciding whether a building should be subject to a lockdown? Is it true that when there are more than 10 cases in the building, then it would be subject to restriction? And would you consider a full lockdown for Kwai Chung estate? And you said you would implement more stringent measures in rolling out the vaccine bubble. So how stringent would that be? And about the nomination period for the CE election, now the nomination period is not gazetted yet. What's the reason, and what's the holdup? And do you intend to run yourself? There is someone who has announced he would run already. 4 questions. You mentioned the 3 government officials. I assume you are talking about the 3 officials who went to Penny's Bay. Like I said, some officials are undergoing quarantine and they have taken their own vacation leave, and there are officials who are subject to self-monitoring and compulsory testing on leave. So far, 1 official has not resumed duty yet. That is the Secretary for Home Affairs. I requested him to be on leave until the 4th day of the Chinese New Year. For other officials, once they have secured a negative nucleic acid test results, they can resume work. The second question about Kwai Chung Estate. Every time when we make a decision about concerning the epidemic, we would base on science. One factor is the number of cases and preliminary cases and the distribution of cases. If you say we would impose a lockdown for every 5 cases, fine. However, if the distribution is different, say if these 5 cases come from different families, or if they come from the same floor, then it would be different. This morning, as advised by the Secretary for Food and Health, as there are more than 10 preliminary positive cases from Ha Kwai House or Ha Kwai building, we believe that there is a risk. Hence, it would be safer if we impose a lockdown or a restriction so as to curb the transmission chain. That is the standard. About the idea of a full lockdown of Kwai Chung Estate, from an anti-epidemic point of view, it may be even more safe. However, you have to consider the 35,000 residents in the estate. And also our capacity is not unlimited. That's true for every government. For places where there are major outbreaks, cases are not being hospitalized. At present, in Hong Kong, we are still able to receive confirmed cases and isolate them until they are recovered and tested negative. For many other countries and places, such arrangements is no longer possible. So that's the capacity issue. Considering these 2 factors, I can tell you today, besides the Ying Kwai, Ha Kwai, and another building, we don't think a 5-day lockdown is necessary for the other buildings. After assessing our capacity for 1 day's RTD, that is a restriction and testing declaration, if there are more preliminary cases, we can continue with these arrangements. That's true for Ying Kwai House and Ha Kwai House. Before the lockdown, a 1-day RTD was issued. When the situation was found worrying, then the lockdown would begin seamlessly.
In terms of reinforcing the vaccine bubble, there could be different options. One is to expand the scope of the bubble. For civil servants or government employees, they must be vaccinated by February the 16th, or else they would be seen as taking unauthorized absence. And other institutions such as universities or the hospital authority also heeded the advice. So this is one option to expand the bubble. And we are now relying on Cap 599F to govern various premises, but 599F only governs a dozen or so premises. So another option is to expand the scope of Cap 599F so that we can make vaccination mandatory for more premises. So this is one approach we could consider. As for election-related questions, the sixth chief executive election will take place on March the 27th. And the start of the nomination period would be announced soon. Final question for the day. The gentleman in black at the back.
Couple questions from RTHK. First is, why is Secretary for Home Affairs Casper Choi still not allowed to resume his duties? And how will you deal with other officials who attended the same party? Second, on the lockdowns at Kwai Chung Estate, what is your response to reports and online posts on complaints from residents there about the lockdown, saying that there are overfilled bins, garbage piling up, and poor meals arrangements? What is the threshold for extending or imposing new lockdowns in the estate? And lastly, you mentioned possibly expanding the vaccine bubble and keeping social distancing rules. So given the current COVID-19 situation in Hong Kong and calls from experts to ask people to wear 2 masks for further protection, why do you still choose to not wear a face mask during this session? Thank you.
Thank you for the 3 questions. Now, first of all, is about the internal investigation into the disciplinary aspects of the officials who have attended the birthday party reception on the 3rd of January. The investigations are coming to an end, and I would make my best effort to announce the investigation result and the consequential actions before the Chinese New Year. Now, I would need to emphasize that the total of 15 public officials, including one who is on pre-retirement leave, you should not treat them as a homogeneous group. I said on the 6th of January, as well as on the 7th of January in my press statement, that we need to deal with each individual official's attendance at this dinner party. The scope of investigation includes when did he arrive, how long have he stayed in the dinner reception, which means that when did he leave, and what sort of activities he or she engaged in during their stay in the dinner party. So this is not a homogeneous group. In other words, one would not expect that the internal investigations will come to the same conclusion and hence the same sanction for all the 15 officials as a group. You remember I said that while I will deal with the investigation in a very impartial manner, 中文係不偏不倚, I also said that I had to be fair to each official involved. So they are not in the same group. Now, having said that, by now, it should be quite obvious, based on what I said on the 6th of January, that the Secretary for Home Affairs is an official whom we will have to look into very deeply because of various aspects. He has stayed long. I already told you that he was one of those who stayed for a pretty long period during a pretty late time of the dinner party. And of course, his position is a Secretary for Home Affairs who is involved in the anti-epidemic operation of the Hong Kong SAR government. So I have already asked that he should not come to work until the investigation is completed and the results announced to the public, including any possible sanctions. That is the reason why I have asked him to continue to take his leave and not to come to office, because he is a very important position, the Secretary for Home Affairs. The second question about the Kwai Chung case. Now, there is no doubt that we have a major spread in the Kwai Chung estate based on the Omicron variant, which is highly transmissible. And by now, on a cumulative basis, we already have 220 plus confirmed or preliminary positive cases in the Kwai Tsong estate. But of course, again, in the same way that I described the 15 officials, if you look at these 220 plus cases spread over the 16 blocks in the Kwai Tsong estate, they vary significantly. The Yat Kwai Lau clearly is the core of all these infections with a large number of cases. So having a look at the situation from an epidemiological perspective, and the mere fact that yesterday we still discovered new cases in Yat Kwai Lau, and they are not isolated cases. I think the figure is over 20 such cases emerging in Yat Kwai Lau. And that's why, to play safe, protecting the residents as well as preventing the spread of this virus, we have no choice but to extend the RTD, that is the restricted testing declaration, for another 2 days. That is from 5 days to a total of 7 days. I fully understand the impact on the residents, and there are over 2,500 residents alone in the Yat Kwai building. We will continue to step up our staff mobilization to provide support to the residents. Now, including the Ha Kwai Lau that I announced this morning, we will have 3 blocks of residents totaling over 7,000 people who need to be supported in the next few days in terms of their breakfast, lunch, dinners, and all their daily necessities, their requirement for drugs, and so on. I would not say that we have done it in a perfect manner, but we'll continue to improve. I already said that we will improve in terms of the hotline inquiry, we will improve in terms of cleaning the rubbish and distributing the mailboxes, and also arranging in an orderly manner for the residents to undergo the compulsory testing. As far as the vaccine bubble, let me put it that way. There is no doubt that vaccination remains the most effective way in order to tackle the virus, including Omicron. And unfortunately, in Hong Kong, we have been doing vaccination for almost a year. We started in February last year, so it's almost 1 year. Our vaccination rate still lags behind places in our vicinity, in the mainland, in Singapore, and other places. So we really need to jack up the vaccination rates, especially amongst the elderly. They have been very cooperative. We are seeing the rates coming up, but still, it's not yet reached a stage that we feel safe. Because you could imagine that one of the primary objectives of our anti-epidemic work is to protect our public health system, is to protect Hong Kong's public hospitals. So if an elderly gets infected because, for example, just for argument's sake, a care worker living in Yat Kwai Lau was serving this elderly in an elderly home, and the elderly get infected and spread to other elderly, and all of them have to be admitted into hospital. And they will have to stay pretty long in the hospital because of their preconditions, or even die in the hospital. That would be a major load on Hong Kong's public hospitals. And the last thing we want to see is a collapse of the Hong Kong public hospital system, as we have seen in some other places. So we are finding and exploring all ways to enhance the use of, to enhance the creation of all this vaccine bubble, in other words, to impose vaccination as a requirement for entry into the prescribed premises or joining certain activities. Now, finally, it's a very personal question, but I welcome this opportunity for me to explain once and for all why I'm not wearing a mask on this occasion. This is not incidental. This is a well-thought-out behavior of the chief executive. I stopped wearing face masks on 2 occasions when I speak to the media and through the media to the people of Hong Kong. One is in the Legislative Council chamber, whether when I was delivering my policy address, when I went in to answer questions and so on. The other is standing here in the auditorium talking to you people, and through you, because every time I come out is televised, to the people of Hong Kong. The people of Hong Kong have to hear very clearly from the chief executive what are the messages that she is conveying to the public. the people of Hong Kong may even have to feel my emotions. So sometimes I am pretty relaxed. For example, in August last year, the virus situation was well under control and our athletes were doing so well. I came here to talk to you in a very relaxed and very elated mood. But now I'm very somber. I'm very solemn because I'm very worried. And wearing the mask would not allow people to see for themselves the chief of the Hong Kong SAR. I'm the chief executive of the Hong Kong SAR. People need to understand and feel my feeling. Now I'm very worried. And so I'm not going to smile to you very relaxed or in a very casual manner. This is a very solemn occasion. So I'm not doing it because of discomfort. I'm not taking off mask because of discomfort, because if you see me on the street, I'm wearing my mask. If I do my 3-day presentation of what's an honest, 6 hours a day, I wore my mask. But now I'm talking to the people of Hong Kong. And I want the people of Hong Kong to understand exactly the situation that Hong Kong is in and to pull in their efforts to support this very important fight against the Omicron. So I hope I answer once and for all. This is nothing of personal. This is really performing my duty as the chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Now, I'm coming to the end of this media stand-up. As I said, this is the last occasion before the Chinese New Year. I wish you all a relaxed and peaceful Chinese New Year, but you will see me before you break off for the Chinese New Year holiday. 多謝大家。
今日嘅記者會今日到此為止。
This is the end of the media briefing. Thank you.